Smith Show.
To get up
I want
all of you to get up out of your chairs.
I want all of you to get up out of your chairs.
Right now.
I want you to get up right now
And go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as bad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore."
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you?
Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The bombs are dropping in Syria. It looks like they're, well, could be the beginnings of an Israeli-Iranian war. More unrest in the Middle East, more chaos, and last night, the email box and this morning filled with right-wing blather and anger. And look, don't want this to be the beginning of World War III. Hopeful that, all of my right-wing troll folks who are saying that, Donald Trump has a plan. He's Mr. Art of the Deal. He's got a grand plan. And somewhere it's written down. It's there somewhere. The plan is there. You just don't see the big picture. You don't understand. You don't understand the Trump. And they're right. I really don't get what he's doing. It's amazing to me because in looking at everyone who is involved with this Iranian deal, every one of them say it was working. Highly intrusive inspections. Every step of the way, they were following the agreement. And yet Donald Trump runs out there and says, you're all liars. His own people, they're all liars. And the Iranians, they're liars. And we're yanking out of this, and who knows where it goes. And I'm going to guarantee there will be no deal with the Iranians before the end of Trump's term. I just don't see it. I don't see how you can make an agreement with someone who is as wildly erratic. And the sad thing is that I go back to the campaign where Trump said he's going to surround himself with the best people, the smartest people. Exactly who thought this was a good idea? And there's part of me that goes, this is simply the jealousy angle. This is someone who, I never put a lot of credence in the Steele dossiers, the wee tape. I never really, until kind of now. I'm starting to look at this and go, you know what? Maybe that's possible. Maybe the hatred for Obama is so great that the rest of us be damned. The hatred for Obama was so great by those on the right, and maybe and look, I've always known we're a really racist country, but maybe I underestimated just how bad some in this country really are. And I look at the good news today that the 3 hostages have been released from North Korea. And I give credit where credit is due. They came back, and they came back under Trump's administration, so he had something to do with it. What I do find interesting is my email box is filled with how Obama failed the three of them. And you go, how is that possible when two of them were taken in 2017? How is it Obama's fault? And again, it comes back to everything was Obama's fault. And, I was reminded today that while, during every president's term, this has been the North Korean way for a very long time. They snatch some people up, they make a big production about it, and then they negotiate themselves something. During Kim Jong-un's father's time, during Il's time, it was movies and basketball people. And we kind of gave in, okay, we want our people back, while simultaneously saying we don't negotiate with terrorists and we don't negotiate for, with hostage takers and all that, but we do. And I remember, and this was reminded to me today, that John Bolton, who is now singing the praises of Donald Trump getting involved in this and negotiating this and all of this, back in 2009 when Obama sent Bill Clinton to North Korea, basically just lambasted Obama. Said he was engaging in political ransom. And, I'm struggling with the reality that there are two very distinct sets of rules. One for Obama and Democrats, and then one in a very hypocritical world for the Trumps and the Boltons and that clan. And look, does he deserve credit for bringing them back? Yeah, okay, yes. Nice job. Gold star. But what are we giving up for it? Today we find out that the first U.S. president in history is going to sit down with a North Korean leader in Singapore on June 12th. That's going to happen. And again, it's another one of these moments where you have to begin asking to what end? There's already talk of potentially downsizing the number of troops in South Korea. There's talk of, inspections, but not as, this is one of those things that got my attention. The inspections into Iran from people who I've talked to who know about this stuff, they tell me that some of the most intrusive, we don't have this with Russia. Inspectors had the right to go and inspect this stuff to make sure that they weren't doing it. And yet we've ripped that up. We've broken the agreement. We broke the international agreement. And out of it started another conflict. Yes, the Iranians went and sent missiles. And the Israelis came and overwhelmingly smacked them back. And this is only going to escalate. And the question is where does it lead? Last night I had a lot of comments from people going, and Scott Dworkin was very somber and saying, we just started World War III. I'm hoping that's wrong. I'm hoping that, cooler, saner minds prevail. But I don't know. And I don't see it. And that's the thing that's really terrifying in all of this, is that we've got a president who doesn't know how to back up. And I don't. And I got one really interesting email. You get I put emails into and correspondence into a couple of different categories. You've basically the basic organizing of 1 through 5. The 1s and the 5s, okay, the absolute praise, love you, everything's great. You're right about everything. The Rush Limbaugh, mega dittos people. And then the ones on the other side, you're a complete, you know what, and you're worthless, and you should die tomorrow. And you give them the weight that they deserve. I usually like to focus on the people who are in the middle, who are thoughtful and say, hey, look, this was right. This is questionable. Maybe we should be thinking about this. And one of the people wrote back and said, look, my fear is that there's no plan here. There's no way forward, that this hasn't been thought out beyond the tip of a nose, beyond the reaction. I don't like the Iran deal. I made a promise during the campaign. I have to keep that, regardless of what it means, regardless of what the smart people around him are saying, if there are smart people around him. And the fact that John Bolton is his national security advisor and is directly in his ear, I have no faith in him whatsoever. So what is the grand plan? Because remember, at one point, our enemies were North Korea and Iran. In fact, if you go back to George W. Bush, the axis of evil, 2 for 3. You've now created an environment where we're now being separated from our allies. Where we're now internationally, everyone's looking at us going, you did this. And I can't say that they're wrong. It's just one of those things that, I go back to and you go, do we learn ever? And do we understand the history? I woke up this morning to news reports that politicians and hardline politicians in Iran were burning flags in their parliament, burning American flags. Have we come nowhere from my childhood? I go back into the late 70s and I remember the flags being burned in the streets of Iran. I remember the hostages being taken. I remember the turmoil. And in all this time, have we gotten no smarter? Because we just gave them everything that they wanted, what the hardliners wanted, everything they wanted, we gave them on a silver platter to be able to go back to the moderates. And you have to understand that there are moderates in that country. So we just gave the kooks all the ammunition. And I fear that there's no end game. Where does this take us? What's the plan? Or is there a plan? And sadly, I don't see a plan. And it's one of those really frustrating moments where you go, there's no plan B. I know that. And I got to question if there's a plan A. I got to question if there is any thought put into what happens after today? What happens tomorrow? What happens in 6 months? What happens in a year? Scary times. Love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Was this a smart move? Pulling out like that? Smashing it with a hammer? You're all liars and all of that? Buying it? Is the summit in Singapore a good idea? I'd love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this with Larry Korb from the Center for American Progress. He's going to share some of his thoughts on what this looks like, what it means, where we go, and all of that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
90% of the wealth, 10% of the people. 90% of the wealth. Where do you take a look at yourself? Take a look at yourself. 10% only 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2005. That was the day United Airlines got the A-OK to ditch its pension obligations in federal bankruptcy court. Workers were dragged through years of employee ownership schemes, massive layoffs and concessions, and the gambling away of hard-earned pensions on the stock market. Then in 2002, United filed bankruptcy. Many asked, how could this happen to an airline owned by its workers? By 2005, creditors like Citigroup and JP Morgan were fully in control. Employee ownership had meant trading billions of dollars in deep wage cuts and givebacks for stock ownership and a couple of seats on the board. Controlling interest meant a 6-year no-strike pledge, the slashing of tens of thousands of jobs, and massive outsourcing. By 2005, the stock was worthless. Then United moved to weasel out of union contracts just 24 hours after the court ruled on the pension default. Some 130,000 pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, and ground service workers found their employee stock ownership plans empty. United executives turned billions of dollars over to the federal government, who then administered what was left through the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. In most cases, those pensions were slashed in half, and monthly retiree health insurance costs exploded by 700%. One pilot stated, "I call it legalized crime. I lost almost all my United stock value in the bankruptcy, and here's another part of the retirement I was promised that is gone." Where does it end? You feel brutalized by the system. Somehow, the $6 million in benefits then CEO Glenn Tilton received wasn't affected by the default. Now that United is swimming in hundreds of millions in profit, many retirees have demanded the restoration of their original pension plans.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So after last night, we had this really long bunch of email chains back and forth with a bunch of folks. Evidently, we're sold on the idea that the end of the world is coming. We've just started World War III with Trump's pullout. And I argue, look, the worst possible way he could have done it is what he did. You got bombs, dropping in Syria from both sides now, Israel and Iran, and all kinds of chaos. And here to maybe, help us move in a somewhat more, hopefully, thoughtful direction, I've asked our good friend Larry Korb to come talk with us. Larry is a senior fellow over at the Center for American Progress, where he specializes in military stuff and foreign affairs. Larry, thanks for taking time for us.
It's nice to be with you.
So let's just get right to it. Did we just start World War III?
No, but you didn't help American security, because this deal was a step in the right direction. And I'll get into, some of the bad ramifications, but it's very clear Trump did not understand the way arms control negotiations work. You deal with one specific type of system, like we did, with the Soviet Union and the Nixon administration, the anti-ballistic missile treaty, a limitation on the number of offensive missiles that you can develop. But we didn't say to the Russians, "You've got to get out of, Eastern Europe. You can't go into Afghanistan." And so the idea that somehow you're going to completely change, a nation's behavior was a step in the right direction, because it did limit them. Now, Trump said, "Well, I don't like the fact that some of these things expire in 7 years." All arms control agreements have a deadline. They don't last forever. The one that, interestingly enough, John Bolton negotiated with the Russians in 2002, the so-called SORT, or Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, basically expired in 2012. It was 10 years. So the idea that, this is is simply not true. So the arguments he gave for getting out don't make any sense. Now, in the potential is that it could cause a lot of problems. A lot depends, for example, on what the Iranians are going to do. I don't think they're going to get out of it right away, but you do empower the hardliners there, because they said, "See, we told you can't trust the Americans,"
Yep.
And so, we've got to, spend more on defense, and we got to be more aggressive in the area.
And they're back to burning flags again. I mean, the
Right,
video is all over the news.
Yeah, that's right. Death to America, and death to Israel. It's an amazing thing. People forget that, I dealt with the Iranians after 9/11. I was in New York at the Council on Foreign Relations, and I had this august title there. And they had a candlelight vigil after the attacks of 9/11.
Right.
They reached out to us to say, "We want to help you in Afghanistan. We don't like the Taliban." And they provided us intelligence and everything that helped us drive Al-Qaeda and the Taliban out. And you know what happened? What their reward for it is in January 2002, Bush put them on the axis of evil. This time The first time they gave me dinner. This time when they had me over, there was no dinner. So, you need to understand it's not a question of black and white. You have a lot of different things going on. And as I say, this agreement was a step in the right direction. Question is, what happens now? How do the Russians and Chinese and the Europeans handle it? And will we be able to negotiate another deal? But not in the short term. You're not going to do it. If we have a different president in 2020, you might.
So let me ask you this, because, you hit on this a second ago. I mean, who's going to buy our word? Who's going to believe us? Who's going to make a deal with this president or really any president if it from administration to administration? Now, the precedent we have now set is it might not be honored in 2 or 3 years.
That's right. And that's another thing. Ronald Reagan I had the privilege of working for him, didn't like some of the things that Carter did, but we kept them, okay? I mean, you can't, say, well, I'm a new president, so I'm going to, tear up everything my predecessor did, because, there's got to be some sort of continuity. Why would anybody want to make a deal? The arms agreement with the Russians expires in 2021. Putin offered to extend it for 5 years, and Trump, in the phone call, had no idea it expired and didn't take them up on the offer. I mean, if you had done that, as bad as the Russians are, to keep them from developing new nuclear weapons for 5 more years, that would help us.
Yeah. Well, but here again, this is, I go back to not everyone can be president. And when I think we have this idea in our mind that anyone can do the job from anywhere, as long as you have a little bit of leadership skills, anyone can do it. And look, there's a bunch of institutional knowledge that people have to have before they sit in that chair, and they have to have people around them that have that institutional knowledge, because things like that pop up.
Well, they do. And, no man or woman, hopefully someday soon woman, is perfectly qualified. That's why you surround yourself, with advisors who can help you and explain the situation. I mean, I doubt if Trump, and that's another thing, he doesn't know history. So you got to get some people around you to explain, hey, wait a second. Yeah, the Iranians have done some terrible things, but we have too, because we overthrew, when they had a democracy in the 50s as part of the Cold War, we overthrew it.
Right.
And the Iranian, and that's another thing I worry about, not just Trump, but a lot of people in this country. We don't know history. I think we all came from someplace else, so we kind of put that behind us. But you need to understand those things. Yeah,
and also, we've got this, this bloated self-ego that we're number one and we never do anything wrong.
Well, that's true. And again, you couple this, with the Europeans now who are upset about his new trade policies. What happened? How do we deal with the Russians in Crimea and Georgia and the Baltics if we, have all of these differences already existing over, the deal? And that's another thing. This was not just us. It wasn't like with the former Soviet Union or Russia, like the George W. Bush got out of the ABM treaty. Well, that was just us and Russia. But this is, 5 other countries around the world. Right.
So let me ask you this, Larry, because, I've had some conservatives yell out at me that, I'm just being hyperbolic, and this is part of the grand strategy, I'm being told, that Trump has, and there's somewhere on a piece of paper there is a strategy. I fear it's a blank piece, but there's a strategy of total global realignment, and Trump understands where he wants us to go, and this is just part of that global realignment to where, now we're engaging with North Korea, and now we're taking on China, and now we're doing this, and it's part of the grand strategy, and we just have to let it play out.
Well, again, that's what I do worry about. He has no plan B. For example, with what he did in
I'm worried he doesn't have a plan A, Larry. I'm worried that he just has no clue whatsoever what's going on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you look, Rudy Giuliani, who went to the same high school as me in Brooklyn, said he favors regime change in Iran. You want to overthrow a government of 80 million people? Look at the problems we had in Iraq, which had, like 25 million.
No, I remember the last time we spoke, and it's been a couple of years. You said to me that if for those who want to go into Iran, if you thought Iraq was fun, wait till you get into Iran. And I've always remembered that.
Yeah. I mean, and so, the idea, that, Do we need to renegotiate with China? You bet. But he sends a team over there to negotiate with them, and they didn't even agree among themselves. And so how are you going to be able to get the Chinese? They just sat back and watched, Munchin and Larry Kudlow and everybody arguing among themselves. No, I mean, you need to have, you have your act together. I mean, I'm glad he's meeting with the North Korean leader. I'm glad that the North Koreans let those, folks out. But you got to remember, this didn't cost them anything. They unlawfully arrested them. Now they're letting them go and say, hey, we're really good guys. I mean, what is that?
Yeah,
what does that mean?
Well, there is that, but but that goes against the headline that that Trump was able to get them out, and part of me looks at this, and I look at both Trump and Un as kind of just con men, and I fear that Un is just out conning our con man.
Well, that's true. I mean, because Kim has already gotten what he's wanted. He's going to, this is a horrible dictator who's even killed his own brother. I mean, not to mention what he's done to the rest of the people. I mean, this is a country that took the Pueblo, shot, a ship captured, held the people for years, shot down an American plane, and we are going to legitimize him. He's going to show up. You'll see him shaking hands with the leader of the free world, and what have we gotten for it so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, and I guess Trump tweeted out today that the meeting is going to happen in Singapore on June 12th. I'm curious your thoughts. Is this a good idea? I mean, is it a good idea for the president to have direct meetings with him, given the past, or is this a whole new beginning?
Well, the fact of the matter is, what's your agenda? Okay, in other words, I know Pompeo's been over there. Hopefully, okay, this is what we're going to discuss. This is what's on the table. Because when the number one person meets, you can't undo it. If Trump should agree to something there and, his staff said, oh, my goodness, you shouldn't have done that, then it's too late. So hopefully, they have an agenda and they've worked out all of these things. I mean, Trump has already told our military to prepare to cut the number of troops in South Korea. Wow. I mean, is that something he's willing to give? And what is he going to get, for it? And people forget the North Koreans have made agreements with us going all the way back to the 90s. Will they allow an intrusive inspection like Iran, which, by the way, worked? I mean, the inspectors kept saying they're not cheating. Are we going, to get that? I mean, to have those intrusive inspections. Those are issues that you need to, to have worked out before you get there.
Yeah, you need to be on the right page of that. And again, I don't see, I'm just, I look at our con man and go, and I'm just not all that. I'm not all that confident that the art of the deal is going to be all that beneficial to us, especially when you start talking about pulling troops out of South Korea there.
Well, again, if you got a deal where North Korea agreed to give up its nuclear weapons and allowed intrusive inspections, much like we had in Iran, which, by the way, were the most intrusive, much more intrusive than we have with Soviet Union and Russia. If you got that, then it would, make some sense to begin withdrawing your troops, cut down your exercises, because if they don't have nuclear weapons, they're no longer the same type of threat.
Right.
And I think we ought to have, end the Korean War. That never ended. So, yeah, those are things you could do, but, to allow those inspectors in and really intrusive, because a lot of times they've agreed to, certain inspections, and then they, threw them out, or they said you can inspect one place, and then they started working in another.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to turn the page real quick and ask you a couple of questions on this Gina Haspel, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Something caught my attention at Fox. I guess it was Fox Business. And it's one of these things that, I'm like, I go back to the Republican convention, back during the Bush years, and the attack on John Kerry, the Purple Heart Band-Aids, and I still get emails. In fact, I just got one the other day diminishing his military service. And I look at this statement by this Thomas McInerney, is that his name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where he,
Tom McInerney,
yeah, him. Where he said, about this Gina Haspel that, she's not going to do the torture, not going to do that. And he says, quote, "The fact is John McCain it worked on John McCain, the torture. He said that's why we call him Songbird John. The fact is those methods can work and are effective, as former Vice President Cheney said. Is that appropriate?
Oh no, for heaven's sake! You know, I went back on active duty. I was I was in the Navy, naval flight officer in the '60s, and then they called me back on active duty because I stayed in the reserves to debrief the prisoners of war. I mean, what they went through and how they held up. McCain really didn't give away anything. You know, he agreed to say we shouldn't be fighting this war or something like that, but he didn't give any, you know, classified secrets or anything like that. And, you know, even if it did work, that still doesn't justify us doing it. I mean, you know, we're supposed to have different standards. You know, again, in the military, you get an illegal order, you can't obey it. I mean, this is not who we are. And so this idea is, well, it works, so therefore we can do it. No, the end doesn't justify the means any more than, you know, policemen can torture people that they arrest in order to prevent a worse situation down the road. And, you know, the idea that, you know, McCain, I mean, they offered to let him go because his dad was a commander-in-chief of the Pacific to show that, you know, we're good guys. And he said, yeah, you got to let everybody out who was here before me. And, you know, they didn't do that. Then they tortured him again. Then he gave some statement about, you know, we shouldn't be here and this is the wrong war. I mean, you know, it was interesting. You know, they would ask these people, you know, how many people you got on your ships? You know, oh, a lot of people. You know what I mean? Just questions like that, you know. And, you know, give them the name. Oh, who are your commanders? Or give them the name of the, you know, the offensive line of the Green Bay Packers or something. So, yeah, I mean, to me, that's absurd. Anybody who would, you know, what he went through is just beyond belief. And when Trump, during the campaign, said, well, he wasn't that good. He was a prisoner of war. He wasn't that good a pilot.
Yeah, I like people who don't get captured was his exact words.
Yeah.
But you know, the thing is and this is, you know, the military is supposed, we're supposed to be behind our troops entirely, and yet I see this weird division coming from the right wing, you know, of, you know, it's I don't know. I mean, it's frightful on one hand, but it's just pit of the stomach disgusting.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just. You know, I was listening to BBC this morning, and they had the United Kingdom was talking about, because they did practice torture. And one of the members got up and said something I thought was very insightful. He said, we did it and we apologize. We were wrong. The United States did it. Now they're promoting the person who did it, which I thought was really, you know, what kind of message does that send, you know, to them? And, you know, they had 135 former ambassadors who have said, no, don't put her there. It sends the wrong signal.
Yeah, but here again, we've got our commander in chief, and he's going to get what he wants. And sadly,
oh yeah, he said he would reinstitute torture. He said that during the campaign.
And again, what does that say about us? I mean, and this is the stuff that bothers me, and why I think so many people are so freaked out to go back to where we started from, where a lot of people believe he just started. This is the beginnings of World War III because he is playing into every ugly American stereotype that the hardliners can use against us.
Oh yeah. There's no doubt about it, and that's what makes us special. Not yes, we're powerful economically and militarily, but we're different. And I can remember when I was in Vietnam. People said, well, you're just like the French. I said, no, we don't want to run the place. We're after the communists. That's all we want to do here, you know. But they, you know, it's, oh, you just, you know, come under the French. And first time I went to Iraq, they said, wait, you guys are just like the British. And so we have to, you know, if we give up our values, then we will be seen as just another country.
I'm with you, Larry. I appreciate the time, your thoughts. Thanks for allaying some of our fears. This isn't the beginning. This isn't the beginning, is it?
I hope not.
All right, I hope not too. Larry Korb, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Sure thing, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
Great talking with you. And look, you know, the hope is that, you know, we're wrong, that this isn't the end times. Scary stuff. Love to hear your thoughts, though. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day that as many as 90,000 people rallied for the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment in Grant Park in Chicago, Illinois. The proposed amendment to the Constitution read, "Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." The idea to amend the Constitution to ensure equal rights for women was first proposed by Alice Paul in 1923. In the late 1960s, with the second wave feminist movement, the push for the amendment gained momentum. At the time, women only made 59 cents for each dollar earned by men. Not all labor leaders supported the Equal Rights Amendment. Some worried that the proposed constitutional amendment would nullify existing labor protections for women in the workforce. They instead advocated for legislation around specific issues faced by women. Myra K. Wolfgang, a vice president of the Hotel and Restaurant Employees and Bartenders International Union, testified against the ERA before the Senate in 1970. The ERA passed Congress in 1972, but in order for the amendment to go into effect, 38 states had to ratify it. 30 quickly did so, but then a backlash against the legislation began to gain momentum. Illinois was the only northern state that was a holdout for ratifying the amendment. A massive rally was planned. That morning, the Chicago Tribune described the crowd that was expected, including representatives from labor, religion, show business, politics, and the home. Despite this massive turnout, the Equal Rights Amendment failed to win enough support in Illinois. The amendment fell 3 states short of becoming the law of the land. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
News of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show. It's The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So I got to tell you, I'm feeling a little bit better. Larry Korb kind of tapped down the fears of World War III. But like you said, you never know. You never know. But maybe I don't know. I'm still freaked out by it. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world in Washington, D.C. We've got Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So, I started off today kind of, we just started World War III. Nice job, Donald. Something he always wanted to do, I'm sure. Larry Korb kind of talked me down a little bit, but I don't know. I'm not feeling all warm and fuzzy.
With Iran, you mean, and
yes.
Israel? Well, actually, there's another announcement today that isn't on our news sheets yet, but it was by The Guardian and the New York Review. Dr. Parsi, Trita Parsi, who is head of the National Iranian American Council, was targeted by Black Cube, which was an intelligence, I'm sure you're aware of who they are, an Israeli-backed intelligence entity that had fake reporters call him and 2 Obama White House people to try to get information out of them or to derail them or defame them. Because of the Iran nuclear deal. Dr. Parsi's been an adamant supporter. Now, it goes just a little bit beyond that because, and we're going to find out more on this, but they are linked to people linked to the Trump White House, which is fascinating, the extent this has all gone. And now, of course, missiles fired, which hopefully, that will stop over there. But it's just very intriguing, obviously, Trump just didn't want this deal from day one, even though his advisor and Secretary of State Tillerson did, and Mattis, by the way, Mad Dog Mattis,
right.
Wants the deal. Again, the alternative, we're the only one out of it. Europe's still in it. So if Iran does change course, then the alternative is what?
Yeah, exactly. What? I truly, as I talked about with Larry Korb, I don't believe there's a plan B. I don't even know that there's a plan A. So, I mean, that's where my fear is. This is, in my view, just Trump going, anything Obama did is bad. We're gonna do away with it. And now I'm hearing from you that, they were trying to undermine it all along, which, really?
Yes, The Guardian carried, again, the article today, The Guardian did, in the New York Review. So this is not, just something on a blog. And Dr. Parsi was targeted, as was two Obama White House people. And this was during the transition of Trump. During the transition. And, why would they go back to people that were involved with the nuclear deal except they were trying to find out salacious, ideas on them and what they did, or maybe they were paid by the regime and all that kind of nonsense. So, they were kind of, heck bent from day one to do something with it. Again, I don't think it's been thought out. Now, could the deal have been better? Sure. Did it look bad with the cash sent versus a check? Sure. Meaning the mullahs might want to steal money. It wasn't perfect, but here's what it did do, forgetting all that. It allowed the centrifuges to work backwards so they weren't creating more centrifuges in Iran for nuclearization. That's what it did. It stopped centrifuges. And no report has showed that it didn't. Right. Now, ballistic missiles, okay. There are parts of deals that, again, maybe could have been considered, but the idea was nuclear.
Now, you're somebody who has, a lot of ties in Iran. I mean, you lived there for a while, I guess.
Yes.
And so, so you actually speak Farsi, right?
Yes, I speak Farsi,
So, because I don't think we have any understanding of the Islamic Republic at all. I don't think we have any idea of whatever is going on there and the dynamics. The way I understand it is you got a handful, you got some crazy people who are in charge, but most of the people are kind of want to be brought into the rest of the world, somewhat sane, somewhat rational, want to be like the rest of us, lead lives, raise our kids,
correct,
all of that stuff. How
and they
does
like
this?
Us.
How does this play with them? I mean, today I woke up and I saw, again, it reminds me of being a kid again, of American flags being burned in the Iran parliament.
Well, yes, here's the thing. The old clerics, the ancient clerics that run with the iron fist, most people over there don't like them and they don't want them. So Iran's in a transition. They elected Rouhani, who was a progressive, moderate, president. He wasn't like Ahmadinejad, he wasn't way off his rocker and things. And they elected him. Now, here's the biggest problem with all of this. Not just the fact that Iran's now off the hook on the nuclear centrifuge, creation, but the fact is, when Trump thinks there's going to be regime change, because John Bolton, who's a crazy man in the White House, national security advisor, John Bolton has publicly wanted to bomb Iran. How much do we think that has the Iranian people loving us when he's actually said to nuke Iran? Number two, Rick, regime change. Right now, the people are blaming the clerics because they got the sanctions undone, they got the money back, but life hasn't improved. So guess what the clerics are going to do? Oh, no, it's not us. It's Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's the evil Satan.
So this plays right it plays right into the hands of the clerics.
Yeah, I mean, it's and you just stabbed someone in the back who could have been an ally, because you got to wonder what's going to happen to Rouhani now.
Sure, absolutely.
Not a good scenario. But so let me ask you, how much of this do you think is Donald Trump really has a strategy? Because I've had a couple people email me and say, look, this is part of the global realignment strategy, and you'll see when it's done, you'll understand. Like Trump actually sat down with diagrams and dreamt this up. Do you see anything that could be possibly strategic in this, in kind of a global realignment that benefits us?
No, not at all. Now, the North Korea deal is a separate deal. The stars aligned on that, and we have to give credit where credit's due when we analyze these things. It's a separate deal. Again, China came into play, South Korea, some hardline talk by Trump. That's a separate deal. That will not work with Iran. And what will happen with Iran is destabilization of the Mideast. Again, the regime in Iran is no pleasant, group of people. I'm not saying that. But in order for us to help the people of Iran, that regime has to rot within. We can't try to interfere in Iran by saying, okay, we're now going to starve the people and do the sanctions. They were falling on their own over there.
Yeah.
So this is not a global strategy. In fact, this heats up the tension. Israel, Iran, by the way, whether we like the regime or not, Iran is the only thing that's keeping an ISIS flag from flowing above Damascus. And it drove ISIS out of Iraq. So, there's good and bad within, that country's government structure. But this certainly doesn't do anything whatsoever as a global strategy. In fact, this now takes us right back to probably 15 years ago when it comes to relations of the country and also when it comes to us having any type of influence.
Not good anyway, all the way around. I do want to ask you about the meeting, I guess, set for June 12th. Trump is going to Singapore, I guess, to meet with Un. Thoughts?
Well, now, as far as North Korea goes, everything, again, has aligned. Pompeo, CIA director, was over there at one time. South Korea, I have no doubt China stepped in and pushed this issue. There's no question in my mind. So it's down to the final Singapore meeting on the 12th of June. This is Trump's to lose. If something goes wrong, it's going to be, on him because everything's lined up, including the 3 people returned. Now, does that make Kim Jong-un a nice guy? Heck no. His prison killed Otto Warmbier from Ohio,
right.
And that poor young man died as a result of what they did to him over there. But at least, we're dealing with what we have to deal with, and 3 people have been released, Americans. But again, I'm just fascinated to see, because I'm told that Trump, will go over there kind of unscripted. So if this falls apart, it's going to be on him. I'm fascinated to see what's going to happen. But so far, positive, a lot of wins on this issue.
Yeah, but he's already setting up that there may not be a deal. So, he's given himself an out, I think. I do want to get your thoughts on Bolton's statements back in 2009 when Obama sent Bill Clinton to get 2 American journalists back. He said that, Obama was engaging in political ransom. And, basically said that it was a horrible thing to do. We don't deal with terrorists. And yet now, he's praising Trump for doing what he lambasted Obama for doing.
Well, he's doing that because, look, John Bolton wanted a preemptive, preventative strike on North Korea. He wanted it.
Right.
These are things he said publicly. If you Google John Bolton's name, striking Iran, nuke, this is a guy that hasn't seen a war he doesn't like. This is a guy that helped fed all the false information on Iraq, and he's sitting in the White House. So right now he can't say much because Trump has went too far on this deal. But if Bolton had his way, Trump would not be going to Singapore on the 12th. There would be missiles flying through the air. That's what John Bolton is about. He's always been about that. And he couldn't even get our late Senator George Voinovich, a Republican was a moderate, wonderful man. He couldn't even get him to support him. And Voinovich was going to do everything at the time to stop his appointment for Secretary of State under Bush. That's why, in fact, I meant United Nations ambassador. That's why, in fact, they did a midterm recess appointment. But I've got to tell you, the only way John Bolton could serve is his NSA appointment, Rick, because it doesn't take confirmation. He could never survive even Mitch McConnell's Senate.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Let's move along. The story now, John McCain, would he do the dossier, the Steele dossier again, just the way he did?
Yes, he says he would do it again, and he passed the dossier to Comey, and of course McCain, is terminal with his illness, and so now it's almost like he's sort of making all his statements he can, not just Sarah Palin, but on Trump. And so he made it clear in his book, I guess, the excerpt, that he would do it again and give it to Comey.
Yeah. Are you finding, some of the right-wing treatment of McCain to be kind of distasteful? I look at this Ninnerny or whatever, however, basically calling him Songbird John and saying that torture works in his defense of Gina Haspel and all of this stuff. Do you find that distasteful?
Yes, because I'll tell you why. Look, I don't. John McCain served the country. I give him that. And the man is terminal. And we have to have, thoughts of prayers for he and his family. I am not a John McCain fan. I don't care for John McCain. I don't care for some of the things he's done. However, there is a certain level where you stop, and I have seen some things. I was told by some people, I don't even want to repeat it on air, about, their delight. And I think that's horrible. And then they shouldn't make fun of the man of torture, insinuating he said things. Again, I'm not a great fan of John McCain, but I think there's a way to go overboard on this thing. And boy, I've heard some things that just kind of make me shiver.
No, I mean, we're losing our humanity. I mean, that's
right.
That's my fear. And look, if I'm John McCain, I don't want Donald Trump showing up either. And I said this the other night. I've told my wife.
Right.
I told my wife. I said, I don't want a funeral. I don't want any viewings. I don't want people showing up to make sure. The last thing I want, if I were McCain, the last thing I would want is someone like Trump standing over top of me, looking down on me, going, "Good for you."
Yeah. Look, McCain's angry at a few things, and he never made president, et cetera. But look, it's his funeral. If he doesn't want somebody there, it's fine to express it, no matter who it is. I mean, people are making too much of that. It's like a wedding. You invite who you want. Well, it's a funeral. He will decide that.
And you definitely don't want him. And finally, some recent polling, Democrats may not have a lot to be excited about this midterm. What are we hearing?
Well, now, this is interesting. I have a good buddy. You know how politics runs, Rick. I've got Democratic consultants and friends. We talk. We exchange barbs, and when we agree, we say it. And I've got a friend of mine. He calls me about every 2 weeks and says, "It's all over with. It's done. It's done." Of course, I sent him this. Now, that doesn't mean that the Democratic side in the generic ballot number were 16 points up. More people would favor a Democratic than a Republican member of the House. Now, it's dropped to 3. That doesn't mean that it's over with, because 51% of the people want a candidate who, in fact, will oppose Donald Trump. So all it means is some of the dynamic has changed. This is a very close race for control of the House. I still argue that it's going to be, a barn burner in November.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But at the end of it, the reality for me is it all comes down to the question, how I was polled, who you polled, all of that. I don't put a lot of credence in this, but it comes back down to, come November, you've got to be registered to vote, and you got to get out on Election Day and vote.
You've got it.
Bob, appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1869. At 2:47 p.m., a one-word telegram was sent from Promontory Summit, Utah. The message read simply, "Done." That understated message marked the end of one of the most incredible projects ever completed by working people in the United States, the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. The arduous work of laying the rail track across the continent was completed by a predominantly ethnic workforce. It has been estimated that workers swung hammers some 21 million times, laying the track along more than 1,100 miles. Irish workers performed the dangerous work for the Union Pacific Rail Company, building the track from the east. Chinese labor made up 3/4 of the Central Pacific crews constructing from the west. Laying the track through the Sierra Nevada mountain range meant blasting through solid granite. Chinese laborers used highly volatile nitroglycerin to make way for the railroad. On some days, the track progressed as little as just a few feet. The Central Pacific Company reported that 137 workers died on the project. Newspaper reporters claim to have seen many, many more bodies of Chinese workers. The true death toll will never be known. Both the Irish and Chinese workers not only experienced brutal working conditions, but also had to deal with discrimination. The track also cut through territories of Native American land. The railroad encroached on this land and further accelerated the displacement of Native American people. When the final golden spike was driven into the track at Promontory Summit, the nation was forever changed. The trip across the continent, which previously would take up to 6 grueling months, had been reduced to just 2 weeks. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistory.com, like us on Facebook,
Rick
and follow
Smith.
us at Labor History in 2.
Your proud defender of the working class majority, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So just when you thought things couldn't get really any crazier, and this is one of those things where you go, really? The NRA just got a whole lot crazier? Is that possible? Is it possible that the NRA just completely jumped the shark? And the answer is yes. Evidently, and I just found this out today, and I know, forgive me for being behind the times, I didn't realize that Oliver freaking North is going to be the next president of the NRA. I mean, if this isn't just pure insanity, I don't know what is. The Iran-Contra guy, the guy who was running guns, this is the guy who's in charge of the gun. What rabbit hole did we just fall down? Now, what I find interesting is he said that, speaking of the people who are trying to say we need some bit of gun sanity, he goes on to say that these are not activists. This is civil terrorism. This is the kind of thing that's never been seen against a civil rights organization. Never in America has it been seen in a civil. So the NRA is a civil rights organization. He said you go back to the terrible days of Jim Crow and those kind of things, and even there you didn't have this kind of thing. Do I need to remind anyone that during the Jim Crow days, there were people hanging from trees? Do I need to remind people that a kid may have said something to a white woman who was beaten beyond recognition to death? Do I have to remind people that people were gunned down? Do I have to remind anyone of this? Because what Ali just said is insane. Literally out of your mind, completely freaking insane. They're civil terrorists. You know, these kids who are sitting in classrooms and have decided that they've been living in fear their entire lives because they don't know if at some point one of their classmates who may have lost a marble or is just plain angry got a weapon from his grandfather's arsenal and decided to shoot up the place, and they're tired of that. They're tired of seeing the bloodshed in the media. They're tired of living in fear. They're tired of every door being locked and every chance to move. I mean, to be honest, I remember school. You could walk in any door when I was a kid. They were all open. The school was an inviting place. Now it's an armed camp. And now the people like this idiot who's going to be running the NRA wants guns in the schools. We're going to literally put AR-15s up on the blackboard. And that's what they advocate for. No, we can't possibly, Rick, have any bit of gun sanity. We can't possibly have any bit of rational thought. No, it's civil terrorists. The terrorists are going to take your gun. That's their argument right now. How absolutely insane have things gone. I'll be honest, it's just crazy. Ollie North, head of the NRA. Wow. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Come to talk.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
Join working class reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left, ring shed from red. Father, son, left a cameo, blue denim, head his vein. He's a working class man.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So you may remember the other night we were talking about this story in New York. A sanitation company, you had a driver, you had a helper. They had made an agreement with an immigrant, 21-year-old immigrant guy, to help them out under the table. Little cash on the side, makes their load a little bit easier, kind of a backroom deal. Not, I would argue, something that is legal, something that is, I would want at any sort of policy whatsoever. But, having been from the trucking industry myself, I see it. I saw it all the time. And I just said, from the beginning, why is no one being held accountable, especially because you had the driver and the helper immediately lie that they had no idea who he was. He was a homeless guy who ran out in front of him, or he was a daredevil homeless guy who was, just trying to jump on the truck. It was nuts. And yet here we are, still no one being held accountable. And yesterday, the Teamsters Local 813 and other organized labor folks in New York City held a rally to make someone accountable. And that's why I've asked Sean Campbell to come talk with us. He's the president of Teamsters Local 813 there in Long Island. Sean, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So walk me through this, because as I read the story, the ProPublica story, this was a guy who was getting up every night for almost a year, I guess, like he was going to a job, and they were just paying him cash under the table. Do we know who was paying him? Was it the driver and the helper? Was it the company? Do we have any idea?
Well, listen, we have conflicting stories, but I'm pretty certain that it was the company. In fact, whether or not it was funneled through the driver or not, but, the way we understand it is that the company was well aware of this gentleman being on a truck, and he was somebody that they expected to be at work each and every single night, and he was being paid about $80 a night.
$80 a night to work on a gas truck, on a garbage truck in New York City? Really?
Yeah, it's disgusting, and it's not just at this company; it's at a lot of these companies, And the sad part about this whole thing, they called this man a homeless person, and basically what it meant was that his life meant nothing. He was just trash, like he was being thrown in the back of the truck, and it's really, really insulting. It's disrespectful. And it's just so wrong on so many different fronts, and I just can't say enough adjectives about it, because this is horrible. And, the company, everybody wants to make the driver out to be a villain. And, yeah, he killed the person, and it was him that was behind the wheel. However, this company is well aware of all of the guys who are on their trucks. They're expected to be there. And, I'm sure this guy lied. And this company, the way that they handle their employees, I'm sure that they put a little pressure on him in order to make him say what he did. I don't think that he was alone in his lie.
Oh, I'm sure he wasn't. But at some point, how do you I don't know how you wake up in the morning and having done this, I guess a lot easier than going to jail, I guess. But, it was an accident. I get that. To me, it's the lie. And I read in the story that the police are saying it's not a crime to lie to the police. Since when?
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I think, if I robbed a bank and said, no, I didn't do it, I robbed the bank, they're going to still come lock me up. It's a lie.
I mean, it's just crazy. But the thing is and I keep coming back to this, and I don't want to believe this about us as a society and as a country. But this was a poor immigrant minority who evidently we don't care about. I mean, if this case shows us anything, it shows us we don't care about these folks.
Well, you hit the nail right on the head, and I'm kind of ashamed of it as well. Basically, it's like a tale of two different industries. You have New York City Sanitation, which are also Teamsters, Department of Sanitation. You have the private industry, which is represented by Teamsters, and you have some other unions out there as well. But, at one point, we all kind of had the same contract. Then, after years of different things happening, and these independent unions working their way in, they really drove the standards down. Safety went out the window, and this just became the Wild Wild West industry. So, Teamsters 813, we go out, we try to enforce things. We try to make sure that the people that we have contracts with adhere to what they're supposed to be doing. But you have these independent players out there, and they just don't care. And the fact that this guy was an immigrant, I believe that the company said, you know what, we can sweep this under the rug, no big deal, it'll go away. I'm have a lot of connections up here in the Bronx, and and nobody cared, But if he and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but if he was a Caucasian, male American, would people have reacted this way? Would it just been swept under the rug? I feel like the answer is no. And as an American, we should care about every life, whether we're an immigrant or not. And that's the tragedy about this whole thing. This guy was killed. They lied about his death. His family got no dignity, no respect. He got no dignity, no respect. And you have to keep going and going and fighting just to make sure that the guy didn't die in vain, and that some, sense of respect is being brought to this, and that, somebody will be hopefully now held accountable, because we did bring so much light to this whole thing.
Yeah, and the other question, not just the indignity of being called a homeless person, and, immediately when I'm reading this, I'm going, how many times have they gotten away with this before? How many times has something like this happened that, maybe they weren't killed, but maybe they were seriously injured, and we never hear about it because they're the exploitable, they're the desperate, they're the voiceless. And to me, this is why I'm such a big union supporter. So let me ask you about this sanitation salvage company. Is this a unionized company? Because I got to be honest, I thought all of sanitation in New York was unionized.
Well, no. I mean, I wish it was under the Teamsters, but they have some independent union over there, and these independent unions are boss employer friendly. They care nothing about the men. They care nothing about the industry. They care nothing about safety. The only thing that they are there for is to sign a contract with the employer so that they have contract sanctuary, so to speak, for 3 years. And basically it'd be a contract bar, so a legitimate organization like myself wouldn't be able to go in there for a 3-year period and do anything. So the employers run out, they get these people, they sign these sweetheart deals, and that's what it is. The guys get nothing. They don't get any medical. They don't get any kind of pension plans. If they get holidays, it's because that's what the boss wants to give them, and usually it's the 6 majors. There's no talk of safety, nothing. And over at Sanitation Salvage, the average route is probably about 15 hours a night. So think about it. If you are a driver and or a helper working an average of 15 hours a night, it's only 24 hours in a day. So if you have to travel to and from work, that cuts more time down. When are you supposed to sleep? When are you supposed to eat? When are you supposed to have any time for your family and or yourself? Yeah. Because a lot of them are also working 6 and some of them 7 days a week. And you have guys over there who are working more than 15 hours.
Now, as I understand, the driver who was involved in this accident has recently had another accident that killed another person. And, you come back to this, a couple of questions. I got a bunch of questions. But, what does it take to get this guy off the road?
Well, I would ask myself the same question. But at Sanitation Salvage, I think if you're in good with the boss, they keep you around. If they don't like you, then they dump you. And I guess he must have been one of the favorites over there. Or, honestly speaking, you don't have too many people, even though folks may need a job, that are going to take the kind of abuses that Sanitation Salvage put on their employees. People in this day and time, you have a lot of people who are desperate. They need a job, so, hey, I'd rather have something than nothing. So, you know what? I'm going to keep going back day in and day in, and hopefully at some point I'll find something.
Now, let me ask you this, because you brought up there's an independent union, and I'm of the mindset I'm a wholehearted 100% union person. I believe in the rights of workers to have a voice in the job. I believe in collective bargaining. I believe in all of that. But it appears to me that this union didn't protect its members and didn't protect this young man by allowing a situation of someone working off the books. To me, this is a story of everything that unions should be against and fighting against and vocally speaking out against to hold this union accountable.
Well, and you know what? I really wish that there was more oversight into something like that, because that is a huge problem here in New York and probably elsewhere as well. But you have these independent unions, and like I said, they represent one person and one person only, and that's the employer. That's it. They don't do anything for the workers at all. At all. And, they have a lot of different scams going on, like this one union that's in Brooklyn here. They work out of some type of house, and, it's so many different things that are going on with that. This one is paying that one, and that one is using his money to pay the rent on the house. It's disgusting. If my union did something like that, I'd be in jail.
And you should be. This is where
absolutely, absolutely.
And this is where the conversation turns towards. You look at all of the attacks that are coming against organized labor. You look at all of the right wing attacks, and it's bad actors like this that have to be, I think, flushed at some point or another. Because at the end of the day, it's a 21-year-old immigrant who pays the price. It's the workers at the bottom who are just trying to make a living or trying to support their families. They're the ones being put in these untenable situations.
Yeah, because the family, they are now without their loved one. This person is 21 years old. I have a child that's older than that. He's 21. His life didn't even start, but yet it's snuffed out, and look at the way he went. Yeah. People lied. They told a horrible lie. He's a homeless, basically some crazy person who tried to jump on a moving vehicle. It's a lie.
I got to be honest with you, though, Sean. There was part of me as I was reading the story that was surprised that they didn't just scoop him up and throw him in the back.
Well, quite honestly, I'm kind of with you there, and I'm surprised that it didn't happen either. But I guess they figured if they went to the dump and the truck, once they dumped it, somebody would see this, and now that would be another host of problems. So I guess they figured they'd tell this lie and get
Yeah.
Maybe they can get away with it,
Which leads me to believe they've probably done it before. So now, yesterday you had a rally in front of the Business Integrity Commission. What's the aim there? What are you trying to get them to do?
Well, what we're trying to do is just try to get the BIC to really, say, really take a real hard look at this company and say, maybe this company is not a bad but a horrible actor, and we need to pull their license. And I don't want to see people out of work. But the way that this company has operated for years, they are a horrible, horrible actor, and they should not be allowed to do business in New York or anywhere.
So, last line of questioning I've got for you then, as a representative of trash haulers and garbage men in your area, is this not an opportunity to maybe go to those workers and say, hey, your union let you down, we will represent you?
Well, we've been speaking with the guys. They want to be unionized by the Teamsters. And just so you know, they were Teamsters before, and they decertified several years ago. And what happened? They did it because of pressure from the employer. And now, they got this independent union, and they've had enough. And they even had a wildcat strike last night for a couple of hours, and they eventually went back to work. But they are fed up over there. And just something I must mention, we learned a few days ago there was another accident one of the sanitation salvage trucks ran over a motorcyclist. So, I don't know when it's going to stop. The BIC and the DOT have been there every day checking their trucks, so now what they're doing, they moved the trucks to another location, the bad ones, and they told the off-the-book workers, hey, look, don't come around here anymore, until this whole thing blows over. So they're going to keep cheating, keep lying, keep doing things like this until somebody comes along and says, you know what, enough. You guys are a horrible company. You can't be allowed to do business any longer. And this is one of the main reasons why we've been trying to get this exclusive zone passed, so that there are standards just like DSNY has. There's safety just like DSNY has. And there's a rate of pay just like DSNY has, that people can live off of, support their families, and be able to work like gentlemen.
Yeah, let me ask you, I know that this goes into that last line of questioning. I mean, who are these people that own this, and how well connected are they? The fact that that everything you just said there's a bunch of criminal acts in there. Why are there no perp walks? Why no new shiny bracelets for people?
Well, that's a question that I ask myself as well, because, I know that every time you look around, it appears that, they are honoring Steve Scriteri. He's the man of the year. He's this, he's that. And again, this guy's no Boy Scout. Every business that he's involved in, nobody's happy with this guy. Nobody.
Yeah. Again, this is why the light of day, the sanitizing effect of sunshine, we need transparency. And I wish you guys the best as you continue the fight for this young immigrant and continue to fight for the truth.
All right, thank you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to have me on.
Sean, good stuff. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sean Campbell. He's the president of Teamsters Local 813. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are you as disgusted by this as I am? Are you as angry as I am? Because it could happen in your neighborhood. Love to hear your thoughts. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2005. That was the day United Airlines got the A-OK to ditch its pension obligations in federal bankruptcy court. Workers were dragged through years of employee ownership schemes, massive layoffs and concessions, and the gambling away of hard-earned pensions on the stock market. Then, in 2002, United filed bankruptcy. Many asked, how could this happen to an airline owned by its workers? By 2005, creditors like Citigroup and JP Morgan were fully in control. Employee ownership had meant trading billions of dollars in deep wage cuts and givebacks for stock ownership and a couple of seats on the board. Controlling interest meant a 6-year no-strike pledge, the slashing of tens of thousands of jobs, and massive outsourcing. By 2005, the stock was worthless. Then United moved to weasel out of union contracts just 24 hours after the court ruled on the pension default. Some 130,000 pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, and ground service workers found their employee stock ownership plans empty. United executives turned billions of dollars over to the federal government, who then administered what was left through the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. In most cases, those pensions were slashed in half, and monthly retiree health insurance costs exploded by 700%. One pilot stated, "I call it legalized crime. I lost almost all my United stock value in the bankruptcy, and here's another part of the retirement I was promised that is gone." Where does it end? You feel brutalized by the system. Somehow, the $6 million in benefits then CEO Glenn Tilton received wasn't affected by the default. Now that United is swimming in hundreds of millions in profit, many retirees have demanded the restoration of their original pension plans. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. One of the things that he said, that Sean said there, that I think we have got to be really wrapping our heads around and really fighting for is the idea. He said, at one point they all had similar contracts. And I've been talking about industry-wide bargaining for years, where at some point we're at a really interesting moment in labor rights in this country. We're on the brink of the right wing really going full-scale assault and using the power of the federal government to usurp the rights of 22 states to decide how their public sector workers bargain, their rights on the job, their rights to join and form unions, and how those unions are funded. And, again, these are the people who tell us they believe in states' rights, except when they don't. And as I look at this, just hearing Sean talk about this industry, which, I honestly believe that was all unionized. At one point it had been. And at one point, as he said, they all had similar contracts and they all had similar working conditions and they all had similar wages. So again, you were competing based on, service, based on quality, based on, who had the best employees and who had the best, equipment and high road stuff. Not on who was willing to cheat the system the most. And you had unions there that were checking the books. Understand, when you sit down to negotiate, you open up the books, go, this is what we made. This is how much profit we have. Because the unions want to know, hey, how much do you have? How much did we create for you so that we can share in it? Because the idea is that everyone does better together. Everyone does better. The company does well. The employees do well. Because when the company's not doing well, the company's coming back going, hey, we want some kickbacks. We want concessions, lower health care, lower retirement, lower wages, all of that. So when times are good, you want to say, hey, we want to claw some of that back for our members so that they can have a better life too. They work hard. They play by the rules. They get ahead. And what's happened is you've had a lot of these low road actors. And you've had a lot of these cutthroat companies come in who are going to cut every corner and they're going to cheat every person they can. And in this scenario, I don't doubt, Sean, that they had an entire workforce of people who were off the books, that were paid under the table, and thus you have no unemployment insurance, you have no workers' compensation, you have no state, local, federal taxes, you have none of that. You have no reporting. If they get hurt, they're somebody else's problem. If they get killed, well, they were just a homeless guy trying to run under the truck who needed a ride. He was a daredevil. Just, wow. It's just one of those things where you just go, horrible. And my other question is, how many times has this happened before? Just amazing stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And it's a good thing that Sean and his Teamsters Local is behind this and pushing, because maybe we might get at the truth. And good on them for doing it. Now, today, the Party of Family Values. And I say that out of the side of my mouth. I say that in a very sarcastic manner. The Party of Family Values. Evidently, the Party of Family Values had a meeting Thursday morning. Special Assistant Kelly Sadler, evidently in this big meeting, where they decided that, well, let's mock John McCain. Evidently, this Kelly Sadler said that what they were talking about Gina Haspel, they said, doesn't matter. He's dying anyway. And that got out. And it got out to John McCain's wife. Who, look, I have problems with John McCain too. Was never a huge fan. I did not vote for him in 2008. I don't think he would have been a good president. But he served his country. You can look at his senatorial career and you can argue one way or another. He served his country. And he does not deserve this. And his family doesn't. And as Cindy McCain tweeted to Sadler, may I remind you, my husband has a family, 7 children and 5 grandchildren. And again, I keep coming back to this moment where, are we losing our humanity? Are we losing who we are as a country when this kind of stuff comes up? And I go back to, I look at Antonin Scalia when Scalia passed. I took no joy in his passing, even though it meant for another year the labor movement would survive to fight another day because he didn't get to decide the Friedrichs case. I took no joy in it. And the sad reality is you have some that are so broken, so jaded, and clearly not doing the work of we the people that are in positions of power like this. And I guess, I'm just looking at it and I'm going, I just don't get it. I just don't get how you can go to that place. And, what does it say about where we're heading? I mean, Gina Haspel, in my view, is not a good candidate. She is the embodiment of things that we should be against. We're better than torture. We're better than all of the things that we see coming out of horrible places. Or at least I hope we are. I hope we've learned from our past. Because I fear we're in this really weird world where this kind of stuff, this kind of rhetoric, this kind of just vile behavior almost seems like it goes by without anyone really being shocked anymore. And our ability to be surprised, and then I wake up every day and I see this horrible story and I go, not surprised. Michael Cohen. Look at Michael Cohen. We find out that he's just pocketing tons of money. Big corporations are funneling, the 1.2 million from this group, 500,000 from this oligarch, 600,000 from this company, and this is just the beginning of it. We don't actually know all of it. And you have someone like Mike Pence, and this is the thing that gets me. Now, Mike Pence is supposed to be the straight arrow, right? Isn't that what we're told? Good, God-fearing Christian, evangelical, hardcore, Old Testament, fire, brimstone, eye for an eye, tell the truth. This is supposed to be his wheelhouse. He's supposed to be the straightest of straight arrows. In fact, so straight that he won't allow himself to be in a room with a woman unless his wife is standing right there. He was interviewed today by Andrea Mitchell and asked about the obvious scandal, because this is a pay-for-play scandal. This is what it is. If this were the Clinton years, if this were the Obama years, there would be calls from the radical right of more hearings and special counsels and get Ken Starr back. Let him fire up the smut machine and get right back into it. And yet, Mike never fails to surprise. So she's asked about, is this draining the swamp and, all of this stuff. And he says, well, what can I say? Is that private matter. It's a private matter. It's something I don't have any knowledge about, and the White House has issued a statement saying the same. So if I'm getting this right, this kind of scandal is no longer something that we should be investigating. It's just a private matter. As I read that, I'm thinking this guy could be president. If Trump resigns, which a lot of people are hoping that happens, a lot of people are hoping he's impeached. I have another friend who keeps telling me not going to make it to the midterm election. Something's going to happen. The angels are telling her. Pence is the next guy. And what he's saying is private matter. You shouldn't have to look into it. None of your business. It's private matter. And I'm going, really? Companies buying access to our president through someone like Michael Cohen, and we don't get to know about it? That's a private matter? On big things? I mean, the AT&T Time Warner merger was a pretty big thing. Net neutrality, pretty big thing. AT&T was seeking direct contact to Donald Trump, getting into his ear through his bag man. And what's amazing to me is, I've known bag men over the years. When I was a kid, I knew numbers runners. When they still, before you had computers and all that, you actually put it on paper in a paper bag and they run back. Cohen is the only bag man I know who kept records, and lots of them, copious notes. And now it's going to bite him in the behind. But it's a private matter. Private matter. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. When we come back and talk a little bit about school privatization, what happens when our public schools are, deliberately drained of resources for them to continue to operate? Well, we'll find out. Quick break. Right back.
I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
In September, the giant retail monopolist Amazon announced its intention to build a second corporate headquarters in someplace North America. Where's that? Aha, that's the trick in a corporate game called Fleece the Taxpayer. CEO Jeff Bezos demanded that every place submit a list of incentives they would pay to get Amazon to put what he calls HQ2 in their place. Yes, the haughty Amazonian royals actually commanded our public officials to bring all the jewels, gold, and other taxpayer booty they have and kiss Bezos's ring just to be considered for HQ2. In one stroke, taxpayers all across America were pitted against each other in a bidding war. Amazon even listed specific incentives that each supplicant should offer. First was a business-friendly environment. Then, urging hopefuls to think big when offering freebies, the directive demanded contributions of, quote, land, site preparation, tax exemptions, relocation grants, workforce grants, utility grants, and fee reductions. Surely, no self-respecting civic official would willingly play the sucker in such a demeaning sell-out-the-public scam. Officials from 238 cities, regions, and states have so far rushed to Bezos's corporate castle to woo and grovel in the perverse hope that Amazon might choose their taxpayers to rip off. This is Jim Hightower saying Amazon has announced that it has narrowed the actual contenders to 20 cities, so they will now be compelled to jack up their bribe offers. That's the whole purpose of the HQ2 game that this corporate huckster has been running on us. In fact, Amazon's site location team had decided from the start which half-dozen or so cities would be most profitable for the giant. The whole thing is a scamazon, snookering cities into a rigged game only Amazon can win.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
A new report coming out this week. You may have heard the name Gordon Laffer. He's a political scientist and professor. He has put out a new study saying the cost of charter schools in 3 cities in California has cost every student in the district $1,000 to create these charter schools. While only a handful go to the charter schools, the amount of money spent propping these additional schools up is, well, starving the districts of resources for art, for music, to have guidance counselors, to have nurses and librarians and all of this stuff. And at a time when you've got, well, legislators crying poverty and saying we need cuts. And to me, this is all part of the scheme to privatize our education system, to create the crisis. Well, they can't handle it. To put it in the hands of the profiteers, to where it's another commodity that is sold to our kids. And here to talk a little bit about it, share some of her thoughts and her wealth of experience, I've asked Mary Sheehy Moe to come talk with us, former state senator in the great state of Montana, also a retired educator and current city commissioner out in, I guess it's Great Falls. Mary, thanks for taking time for us. $1,000 from each kid in a school district out in California is being taken to prop up these charter schools.
Shame that we haven't done everything that we can to protect our public schools.
So
and it's not just the money, Rick. Our public schools are there not just to create educate a public, but to create one. And I see that every day in Montana. It's really our story here. And you end up knowing things and understanding things about one another that otherwise they're really the glue of a society, I think.
So you're talking about shared experiences across class lines, across race lines, across gender lines. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. When you think about it, public education is the only time in an American's life when he or she spends significant formative time around lots of people who don't think the same way, worship the same way, honor the same customs. And it's really an important experience for all of us to have, just to understand how, as they say, the other half lives.
That's a good point. But, here's the thing, and I get a lot of this from the people who really push the privatization angle. They don't want what you're offering. They want their very narrow-minded education is only about reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's not about all of that social stuff that you're talking. I have people I know who I don't want my kids to see all that stuff. I want them to, in fact, I know one guy who tells me the only book that the kids need is the Bible. So the other part of this is you get a whole bunch of Christian kind of, or Muslim, or who knows what kind of education, where we're leading completely separate sects and different lives and creating a whole bunch of divisions.
Well, I guess my response to that is that I'm sorry you feel that way, because I mourn the loss of your child in my public school system. I honor the right that every parent has to seek a religious education for their child, but our public schools are diminished by their loss. That said, it is not in the public interest to fund your private choice.
Right. So let me ask you, because, I look at this and, I went to a public high school and I think I did okay. We're continually told, though, that public schools are failing. We're continually told that, that it has to be, we need this other system to compete to make it do better. Do you put anything into that? Do you buy any of that?
No, I don't. And I have spent considerable time. I have a doctorate in education, and the issue of privatization was starting to come up as I was getting my doctorate in 1997. So I followed it and the literature concerning it ever since. And you can find studies that will show that certain private or charter schools do better than public schools. But you will not find studies that show that private or charter schools that educate all kids who walk into that door and allow all kids to walk into that door do better than public schools.
That's a good, because what you're saying is these charter schools get I think they call it creaming. They get to take the cream of the crop the kids who do well and don't have learning disabilities and have active and engaged parents and all of that stuff, right?
Exactly. And, we have one of our, he's now a congressman for Montana, but he's one of the biggest proponents of private schools, school choice, they call it, in Montana. And the primary school that he has fostered doesn't allow special education. They won't take all special education kids. And the reason they won't is not a difficult one. It's not discriminatory in the classic sense, but it's special education students are expensive to educate.
And they don't do as well on the test. I mean, at the end of this, it's really all about, the numbers, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's about the buck. And there is a certain elitism to that particular choice that I, too, shrug at and take offense to in some ways, because to say that you don't want your child to mix with the public school kids is so antithetical to everything we think about really what we are as a society, but that's kind of where we are now.
You know what I think, Mary, and I've gone through this a couple of times, a number of times with people. They all think they're going to get the elite private education. And I remember having a state senator on from Pennsylvania a number of years ago when they were pushing vouchers especially. And I said, this golden ticket voucher that you're throwing out here and that you're saying we're going to have all this choice and I'm going to get all these wonderful choices. Am I going to be able to send my kid to this Abington Friends School in Philadelphia, which for kindergarten's like $40,000 a year? And he said, yep, you get the voucher, you get to go there. And it's flat wrong. It's not the case, but they're leading us to believe that we have those choices, that our kid's going to get, the same education that, President Obama's kids got, or Warren Buffett's kids get, or Bill Gates' kids are getting. And the sad reality is it's not.
Not only that, but as I started out with you, they never really will know. Have you ever read the book To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yeah, back in high school.
Well, there's that scene in there where there's a lynch mob in front of the jail. And Atticus Finch, the hero of the book, is out there, and he's going to keep the guy, he thinks, from being lynched. And just as the heat rises, Atticus's children come out, his boy and his daughter. And one of those lynch mob guys looks over, and he sees Scout Finch, this little girl, and he realizes that little girl is his son's good friend at school. And she doesn't know what's going on, but he just looks at her and looks at Atticus and thinks, I don't think I want to tell my kid what I'm just about to do to this, his friend's father. And he rounds those guys up and goes home. Now, that's not the point of the book, but it is one of the benefits of public education. You know people that you otherwise would never know, and you know them in a way that is really important to what we are as a society.
Yeah, you have that shared experience, and I've said for a while, you go back to that whole school spirit thing. That everybody grew up, their high school or their middle school, or we're the best and we're going to compete with others. You internalize that, and it becomes part of who you are at that moment and part of who you become as an adult. And I agree. But one of the things, and I think Warren Buffett said it best. He was talking about how very wealthy in this country send their kids to these elite schools, and they're not in the public schools. They may want to help the public schools a little bit, but it's not the kind of education that we get their kids in. And I said, if we had a way to make sure that their kids were in the same schools as our kids, those schools would be much better.
That's right. It takes, everybody's got to be engaged in public education. And another kind of common myth is that that we're educating our own kids, and that's what we're doing in public schools. And we're really not educating our own kids. We're educating everybody's kids. My mom sent all of us to a Catholic school. It didn't take with me, so I'm the only one in my family that has a public education in her background. But she was proud until the day she died that she never voted against the school levy, because she understood that though her choice was for a religious education for most of her children, she had a duty as an American to contribute to the education of everybody's kids. And there's an important distinction there, I think, that we're losing track of.
No, I'm with you there. I mean, and I like the way that you go, that it's what creates the public, which creates the glue that makes us, that holds us together. And I mean, because you look at how divided we are as a country, and issue after issue, we're so polarized. And education should be that one thing that all of us want what's best for our kids, and we should want to make our local public school the best it can possibly be. But now we're sold this idea that, hey, we can the heck with that public school. Let all those people, let them suffer. We'll have this shiny new school over here. And the sad reality is those are fly-by-night joints worse than the public schools are. They come and go, and some of the shenanigans, especially in poor areas, is just criminal in my view. Yeah, I agree with you. So what do you tell people? I mean, how do we fix this problem? Because there is this view that public education is failing us. Do you agree with that?
No, and the data just don't support it. And I don't know how many of your listeners live in rural areas, but in Montana, there are only seven cities in the entire state that have more than one high school. So we are literally all thrown together when we go to school, and there are some schools that are so small that they're even to have 100 kids in the high school is not a stretch.
Right.
And so this thought fiscally that it's a terrible disservice to all of those schools to say we're going to strip out state money to fund this other choice that we have no oversight over. I mean, when do we do that in the public sector? That we're just going to give you this money and let us know how it works out, or maybe not.
Well, that's because we have this blind faith in the private sector. We believe everything public is bad, everything private is good, and as long as you keep with that very simple public bad, private good, as long as you have that, it doesn't matter what the private sector does. Well, and
we just can't afford it.
So what you're telling me is you've got a bunch of charter schools coming into Montana, into very small districts? Because I've been saying, look, I mean, we see these charter schools coming in mass in rural, in urban areas, high populated areas, especially in high poverty areas. And I've been saying for a long time, look, it's going to eventually eat up the entire education system. You're even seeing it in your state of Montana?
Well, we're seeing that movement, but just the pragmatics of it are that for the vast majority of communities in Montana, they're not going to have a charter school. And yet you'll have people from Culbertson, Montana. The Speaker of the House in Montana is from Culbertson. He routinely supports what they call school choice bills, and they're never going to have one in Culbertson. The high school, if it has 100 students, I'd be surprised. And so they're these people that are supposed to be representing the public interest are voting for bills that are going to reduce the amount of funding that goes to their own public schools, when that isn't even going to be a choice there realistically ever. And it's all with this kind of jingoism about the competitiveness and one, how they can do so much better in the private sector, when it's a complete disservice to the people that man represents. They're never going to see that. And it strips the money away from their schools.
What's frustrating to me is, the idea of charter schools came from actually the AFT president, Albert Shanker. And the idea was that they would try things differently. That it would be laboratories of invention, and they would try best practices, and then they would share them. And what it's turned into is really a massive ripoff. We have developed curriculum that somebody has then privatized, patented, and then ends up selling it back to us. Something we paid all the research and development on, and then they're going to sell it back to us when they take on these charter schools and it's really interesting to me how all of these little businesses popped up that are feeding off of our education dollars, and we're creating all these millionaires and billionaires out of less opportunity for our kids.
Well, it's kind of funny because, the same thing is happening in higher education, although that's a different subject. But all of those research labs that are part of our public university system, they generate a lot of that same kind of innovation. But there's nothing that precludes a public school from doing that same kind of innovation, particularly if you're in a community of where you have multiple schools. And we have school choice in Montana that is public school choice. In fact, in my hometown, we have a wonderful center of innovation that started out as an at-risk high school for kids who just, a lot of people just don't fit into that 7 classes a day, the rah-rah. They just don't want that.
Right.
And they have done just a wonderful job of innovating for all kids, for the student who is saying, hey, I can get out of high school in 3 years and I can start going to college right away, and all manner of other kinds of things. And you can do that within a public school setting. You just need to have people that are really engaged with their public school.
Yeah, good point. No, the other part of it is we could talk about cyber charter schools all day long and how those are just the biggest ripoff of all. And you see some of the worst abuses going on in there. But last question I've got for you in looking at this, we all like the idea of choice. What do you tell parents? I mean, what should we be doing to make sure that our education dollars are spent properly, that our kids get the best opportunities possible? Any advice?
Oh, yeah. Because whether you send your child to a private school or not, everybody should be concerned about public education. If for no other reason than you don't want to live with people who aren't well educated. Our whole society is focused on having informed voters. So get involved with your public schools. If your public schools are failing, it's because you're sitting somewhere complaining about them, instead of getting in there and rolling up your sleeves and doing something about them. If you don't think that you can do that, that's a castaway. You're using that as an excuse. Get in there and be the change you want to see.
There you go. Good advice. Mary, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing your thoughts. Good stuff. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff, Mary Sheehy Mo. And again, I've never been a huge charter school fan. Especially not the cyber charter ones, and we could go into all the abuses all day long. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day that as many as 90,000 people rallied for the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment in Grant Park in Chicago, Illinois. The proposed amendment to the Constitution read, "Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." The idea to amend the Constitution to ensure equal rights for women was first proposed by Alice Paul in 1923. In the late 1960s, with the second wave feminist movement, the push for the amendment gained momentum. At the time, women only made 59 cents for each dollar earned by men. Not all labor leaders supported the Equal Rights Amendment. Some worried that the proposed constitutional amendment would nullify existing labor protections for women in the workforce. They instead advocated for legislation around specific issues faced by women. Myra K. Wolfgang, a vice president of the Hotel and Restaurant Employees and Bartenders International Union, testified against the ERA before the Senate in 1970. The ERA passed Congress in 1972, but in order for the amendment to go into effect, 38 states had to ratify it. 30 quickly did so, but then a backlash against the legislation began to gain momentum. Illinois was the only northern state that was a holdout for ratifying the amendment. A massive rally was planned. That morning, the Chicago Tribune described the crowd that was expected, including representatives from labor, religion, show business, politics, and the home. Despite this massive turnout, the Equal Rights Amendment failed to win enough support in Illinois. The amendment fell 3 states short of becoming the law of the land. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
You know, to highlight this study, and there are tons of studies about how, do charter schools do better than public schools? Do public schools do better? And on average, charter schools do about the same. To me, the whole push towards charter schools was about breaking the unions. It was really about breaking the teachers' ability to support themselves, because teachers at charter schools make significantly less money. And where does the money go that they're not making? Well, of course, it goes into the CEO's pockets of the businesses that write the criteria and the curriculum and all of the stuff. Hire the janitorial crew and lease the building and pave the parking lot, and all of these schemes and scams and opportunities for nepotism and just the whole cocktail of kleptocracy right there in front of you. But this study by Gordon Laffer, he looked. It's titled "The Breaking Point: The Cost of Charter Schools for Public School Districts," and they looked at the Oakland Unified, the San Diego Unified, and the East Side Union school districts. And what they came up with is at the Oakland Unified, about $57.3 million a year went to charter schools, or $1,500 per student across the entire district went into these charter schools, which means that in that district, $1,500 from every kid went away, and all of the money that the students that left went. So all of that money that went to fund the building and pay the janitors and the teachers, all that stuff, cut. And they can't raise taxes because, look, Oakland's got problems like everybody else. So what they end up doing, they end up cutting art and music and extracurricular stuff, no more sports programs, all the stuff that keep kids engaged in their school and give them a sense of community and a sense of camaraderie, and all that out the window. San Diego Unified, almost $66 million, and the East Union, $19.3 million per year. And again, what the study overall found is $1,000 per student across the board was taken away. And what did that mean? Well, less opportunity and a starving of the local public school. When I was a kid, and I remember this, the Puritas Elementary School in our neighborhood, in the summertime had a school lunch program. This was pre-Reagan, of course, who, when he came in, did away with all of it. Mr. Ketchup is a vegetable. But I remember, in the summer times, we would go to the local public school, and there would be, sports programs, and the Junior Achievement had tennis programs, and they were doing all things to keep kids, especially in a high poverty area like I grew up in, active. And they had a small lunch, and for many of the kids that I knew there, it was the only hot lunch they got all day. And Reagan did away with all of that. And where did that money go? Well, it went to tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. So again, we just look at this stuff, and it's nothing new. This is what the party of family values has brought us. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like tide flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious,